Hello, and welcome to the FDOT Connect 1011 GeoTech Tools webinar. My name is James Griffith. I am one of the CAD developers for the Production Support Office. So here are the topics that we'll be covering today. We'll be going over the software version, a little bit of history on the GeoTech Tools, the accepted files, where to locate the geotechnical data sheet, creating the structures and roadway report of core borings, creating the 2D and 3D design files, as well as creating the cross sections. So one of the first things that we want to do is to verify that we're running the latest and greatest software. One of the ways that you can go about doing this is going to our software page and looking at the current version that's available. A lot of times what you'll find in these little updates is bug fixes, updates to tools, and additional features. It's always a good idea to be running the latest and greatest software. One of the simplest ways that you can find out what version you're currently running on your computer is to go to the FDOT Connect folder, go down to Workspace Doctor, double click that. If you'll look here at the top right corner, you'll see versions, click that, and it will show you what version you are currently running. Quick history of the GeoTech Civil Tools. For the Select series, we had the GeoPack Borehole Navigator tools. Those were discontinued when the Connect series came out. Then there was the Open Roads Designer GINT Civil Tools that went from 10.7 to 10.8 and was unfortunately discontinued. We went ahead and created the FDOT Connect GeoTech Tools, starting with the 10.9 series, and have continued to expand upon that. Accepted input formats. The GeoTech datasheet is the file that we will be using to actually import data into the GeoTech tools. The tool does allow for legacy files, but will require a little more manipulation to get it into the correct format to be sucked in by the tools. If for whatever reason you do need that function, please contact the office. We can walk you through getting that set up correctly. The GeoTech tool does save out an XML file, and that XML file is what's used on the later part of the tools to create the drawings. So now let's go ahead and show you where you can find the GeoTech data sheet template file. We'll come down here to our Explorer. We will go to this computer, go under our C, go to Worksets, FDOT. We will then go to our workset. Mine is the GeoTech webinar. Come to the geotechnical folder. As you can see, we have a geotechnical datasheet template file. This file is auto-generated when you create your workset and will be contained in this folder. We can then double-click this folder and take a look. As you can see, this particular Excel document contains a lot of fields. You can enter all of your information into here. Each tab across the bottom contains different information. Information can be added. Usually the first three are pretty much the primary ones to be used. There is also fluid loss information, sample data, core data, and undisturbed data. Now what we're going to do is look at the initial setup of your project as well as opening the blank DGN and going on from there. So one thing that we want to verify before starting any project is that we are working in the correct workspace and working in the correct work set. Next, what we want to do is open the blank DGN file. We'll do that by going to the Browse button, selecting that, going down to blankfile.dgn, clicking on that, and then clicking the Open button, as you can see here. Once you click the Open button, it's going to take a few seconds to a few minutes, depending on your computer, to fully open the blankfile.dgn. May look like it's not actually doing anything, but I assure you it is. As you can see, it's now loading the necessary files, loading the tools, and there we go. The DGN is fully loaded. So what we're going to do now is open the GeoTech Data Manager, look at the UI, add some data so that you can see the interface. Then we're going to import a structures SPT file so you can see that data. Then we will open the roadway auger file and look at that data. Now what we're going to do is come up here to the FDOT tab and click on that, go to the Geotechnical section, go to the Geotechnical Data Manager, as you can see right there. Click on that. Once the tool comes up, we can see that we have data areas that can be populated, an add button if you wanted to work directly into this. The file allows you to open a new project. XML would be a save file, importing the datasheet as we talked about before, as well as the legacy files. Again, those do need some work. You can save your progress as you go and close this particular window. The OpenXML is the file that this actually saves out that builds the rest of it. So now if we go to the Add button and click on that, borehole ID is a required field, so that must be filled out for each one. We'll go ahead and just add some random data, pick our bore type, and as you can see there's a bunch more data to input. Fluid loss data you see right there. You can do the same thing, you just enter the information there, come down and click the Save button. We're not going to be adding anything, so we're going to go ahead and hit the Cancel button. There is some more information that you can add. I'm going to add some nebulous data right here just so that you can see what that looks like. I'm also going to add some strata data. Again, it's just some random data that I'm adding, and some soil patterns as well. Alright, everything looks good. If we had lab test data, we could enter that information here. Just like the fluid loss data, as you can see, we've got 3 different fields. Once you're done with that, you click the Save button. In this case, we are not saving anything, so we're going to go to Cancel. Everything looks good, if I had all the data filled out, obviously. We will now go down to Save. Click that Save button. As you can see, it's telling us that it's successfully saved. As you can see now, we can also see that that data is in there, as well as the blow count and strata data. I can right click on this and actually copy it in case you have something that's very similar, as well as edit it. We're going to go ahead and add a little more data so that you can see that it updates. Clicking Save again, same thing, save. immediately it updates that information. I'm now going to copy this. This would be used if you have two boreholes that are really identical. Then you can go in here and edit it, update the name, or the borehole ID, I'm sorry. Same thing, click save, like how the data looks, and as you can see we now have two sets of boreholes in here. I can now come in here and delete the borehole if I don't want that anymore. I'm deleting this one. We already have data saved, so we can go down here to new to make sure everything's clear. So what we're going to do now is open some of our sample data so that you can take a look at the data that we'll be using to create the rest of the drawings. One thing to note about opening the XMLs is that if you have one XML open and you open another XML, it will not combine those two files. We're going to start with opening the SBT structures file and take a look at that data. Click the Open XML, go to our work set, go to the geotechnical folder, and open one of our XML files so you can see that data in here. As you can see, there's a few more boreholes. As you click on each one, the data in the blow counts and strata is updating. We can go ahead and open up the other XML so you can see that as well. And click the Open button. It is imported successfully, and as you can see, we've got a different set of data now in here. If you needed to see the additional data stored within that borehole, you could simply click the borehole and then click Edit and see that information. We can now hit Close. Now we're going to create a new DGN using the Create File tool. So now what we want to do is to actually import one of the files so that we can see it. We will first go to Create File. We'll click on that. That will bring up our menu to create the file. We will then pick our discipline. In this case, we are going to go with structures. The file group is our next selection. Pick that, and we will go to the geotechnical sheet files, which is the third one down. We'll click that. We're doing the report of core borings. We'll make sure that is selected. We will enter our bridge number. We will then verify that the county is the correct county. One thing to note is picking the county will update the coordinate system to the correct coordinate system. So we will now move it down to Wakulla. It has updated the coordinate system again. We can now go ahead and create this file by clicking the Create and Open File. It takes a few seconds, and we will have our file created. We can now hit Close, and we can come up to this and close that. We don't need that right now. So now what we're going to do is to create the report of core borings for the SBT structures file. So next we're going to come up to the GeoTech Tools once again under the FDOT tab. We will click the little drop down and we will come down to Report of Borings at the bottom. We'll click on that. That will open a new window. We will then browse to our data set with the Browse button. So we'll click on that. click Geotechnical. We will click the SPT, which is our structures file, and click Open. We will make sure that the report type is structural. We will set it to 1 to 30. That's usually pretty good. About 4 boreholes per sheet is good. And we're going to leave the 100 vertical exaggeration just to see what it looks like. We'll then click the Create Report. Takes a few seconds, and there we go. As you can see, the data that was entered into the borehole information is at the top, as well as the data for the different strata. As you can see here, that information will be for each borehole. We can look at the other boreholes by coming back to the Home, going to Models, as you can see there. We'll click Models, and it looks like it went off the screen on me. Pull that over. There we go. And as you can see, we have another model that we can take a look at. And as you can see here are the other boreholes that we imported. Different strata patterns. Again, data up top pulled directly from your data sheet. One thing to note is that the spacing seems to be a little tight right here. We can change that by increasing the exaggeration. I'm going to go back to Home, go back to Models. I am going to go ahead and remove these two models so that we can start over. And close that window again. We'll go back to the FDOT tab, and top, click that, click on the GeoTech Tools drop-down, go back to Report of Core Borings. We will click the Browse, click the SPT file, click the Open button, and now the only thing we're really going to do is increase this vertical exaggeration. We'll try 200 and see how that looks for us. Click the Create. Drawings complete. Click OK. And if we zoom in, you can see the spacing is better. Close this again. And we can go back to Home, and under the Home tab, go to the Models. Click on that and check our other file as well. Zoom in, spacing definitely looks better, as you can see there. Again, data's pulled in, data looks good, and if we needed to, we could increase that 200 to 250. So to finalize the report of core borings, all we would need to do is reference the models into a sheet that we've generated, and we'd be good to go. We'll go back to the Create File button so that we can create our roadway file. We're going to change the discipline to roadway. We will change our file group to the geotechnical sheet file. Select that. Report of core borings, make sure that's selected. We do not have a bridge number. Our county is still listed as Wakulla, same thing. We will click Create and Open. Give it a few seconds. And we'll have our file. There we go. File is created. We can hit Close. Close this again. Go back up to the GeoTech Tools. Click the drop down. Go down to Report of Borings. Same thing. Click the Browse button. We'll go to our auger file. Click that. Come down to Open. And click that. We will then change our report type to roadway. In this section here, 1 to 30 should still be good. 4 boreholes per sheet looks good. And the 200, we're just going to keep that because that seemed to be good on the last one. Click the Create Report. Drawings complete. We can click OK. As you can see, that data has been pulled in as well. Up here at the top, we have our different water tables, our different strata, and additional information down here. We can click the Home button, Home tab at the top. Come over to Models once again. Click Models. And as you can see, we have 3 different models that we can look at. As you can see, that information's been pulled in nicely. Everything looks good. And again, everything looks good. As you can see, information for each borehole is contained at the top, fluid levels, and additional information at the bottom. Again, the only thing left to do is to reference these models into our sheet, and we'd be good to go. What we're going to do now is go ahead and create our 2D and 3D design file. Then we're going to create our name boundaries and use those name boundaries to create our cross sections. We'll go back to the FDOT tab. At the top, we will go to Create File once again. This time we're going to create our geotech design using the roadway. We're using auger borings. Same thing. Make sure you're in the right coordinate system and county, and create an open file. Give it a couple seconds. And we can click the Close button. Close this once again. Now what we need to do is go to the Reference button that can be found over here in the primary. We are going to go ahead and reference in using the Attach Reference button. We're going to go up one file. We are going to go to the roadway folder, and we are going to pull in our alignment for this project and click the open button. We're going to add another reference, which is our terrain model. Click the attach, go up one, and go to survey. We will click the terrain model right there. and click the Open button right here. Now that we have these two files in here, we can go ahead and close this window. We can close this window as well, and we can fit view this button right here. As you can see, our references in here nice and neat. I will do the element selection just to make sure everything's nice and clear. We can close this again, and we can take a look at this. First thing we want to do is set the terrain as the active. Clicking on that and set as active terrain model. This is necessary to make sure that we're using the correct terrain. We can close this one more time or move it off the screen. Now what we're going to do in this step is pull the boreholes into the 2D plans. We'll now zoom in on these plans so that we can see the boreholes when they get pulled in. We will now go to the GeoTech Tools and go to the drop down. We'll go to the Place Boreholes in 2D Plans and click that. Cell scale looks good. We'll go to the Browse button, click that. We'll go to our auger borings once again. We'll come down to the Open and click that. The elevation settings, we're going to use the surface model, which is the terrain model. The elevation data could be used out of the boreholes, but in this particular case we're going to use the surface model. We'll click OK. Drawings complete. We'll click OK. We can now zoom in and see those boreholes are showing up correctly. There's borehole number 1. We can click on that and go to Properties and see the data is pulled in again nicely. One thing to note here is that the northing and easting is calculated off of the data that is given, either the station and offset or the latitude and longitude, and that information is then stored in here. So now we can get off of that. We can come back up to the GeoTech Tools. So to be able to place the 3D borehole files, we will first need to click F2 to open our 3D model view. We will then go back to the GeoTech Tools. We will then click the Place Boreholes in 3D Model and get an error. This error is due to the fact that we were still in the 2D view, as you can see here with the blue line at the top. We will then click OK and go to the 3D view and click inside there, thus making that the active view. We can now go back to the GeoTech Tools, go down to Place 3D Borehole. The diameter looks good at 2.5. We can go ahead and hit Browse. Go ahead and pick our auger file again. Come down to Open and click that. Again, we're going to use the elevation file in the surface. We can click OK to accept that. It says drawings complete, and as you can see here, we now have our 3D boreholes. The angle needs to be adjusted a little bit. I'm trying to do that. These are your water elevations. These are your different stratas and the different colors of the cylinder, and your data is here in this line. So if we go over that and go to Properties, you can see here again all of that data is stored within the properties. We can now click off of that. Before we move on, I'd like to show you a little more of the properties of this particular borehole. If we select the water disk, go to Properties, you can see here the water table data. I can now click on this disk and it will show that property. I can click on the different strata data and look at that information. As you can see, every piece of this particular borehole does have data stored in it. This next part is going to be going over how to create our name boundaries. Now what we're going to do is copy the alignment into this file, and I will walk you through the steps to accomplish that. We're still in the 3D view. We're going to move back to the 2D view by clicking on the inside, getting rid of that window. We can now go to the Geometry tab and click on that. We can come to Offsets and Tapers, click on the drop down, come down to Single Offset Entire Element, click that. We get this nice little window. We can select our alignment, accept a 0 offset. Notice how it didn't do anything. I'll try it again. Again, doesn't do anything. Reason for that is we have not selected a feature definition. For this particular case, I'm going to do a baseline and call it BL-Geotech. We can now, after having that data inserted, re-click the line, accept the 0 offset, and actually create an alignment in our file. Close that. We can now go to the Explore button up here in the top, click on that. We can verify that we're in the Roadway Model tab, go to Alignments, Baseline, and see that that has actually been copied into the file. So now that we have the alignment in the file, we can zoom out a little bit, readjust, go to the selection tool to verify that we've got everything nice and clear. We can hit F5 to make the reference files a little darker so that we can see what's actually in this model. We can then go to Modify and click the drop down for that. We can select our start station. I happen to know that the start station is 700 for this particular intersection here at the bottom corner. Going down here for the selection snaps, clicking intersection, coming back up here, calling the start station 700, coming down to our intersection. As you can see, it's trying to give me the start station. I will pick that nice intersection right there. It will then calculate forward and backward stations off of that location. Everything looks good. And close that. What we're going to do now is select all of our boreholes and add them to an event point list and use that information to create our named boundaries. What we can do now is select our first element by clicking on this outside edge. So with this one, the borehole text seems to be associated with the symbol. We'll pan over and take a look at another one to verify this. None of these buttons will change the fact that these boreholes and the text associated with it, they are all part of a selection group. So what we need to do now is come up to Drawing and go to the Groups. Click the little drop down at the bottom. Select our borehole labels. Click on that and go ahead and delete that group. Now that we have that done, we can go to our multiple selection, click the first borehole, click the next borehole. Notice I'm clicking the outside edge to only select the one borehole. The reason that we only want to select the one symbol is that if we were to accidentally select the 2D and 3D symbol, we would end up with multiple duplicate event points. And the last one, click that. Now that we have all of these selected, nice and neat, now we can come up to the Drawing Production tab. We can come up to the Geometry tab, come over to Event Points, click on the event point list. We can now come down and select our alignment. We can close this. We can now click the Add Event Points. Click that. We can right click anywhere out here in the black, and one more time to do the final accept. And now we have all 10 of our event points in for these boreholes. Everything looks good. We can close that. We can now go to our drawing production, go to named boundaries. We can now set our drawing seed. We have the name in here. We can turn some of that off. As you can see here, we do not have event points. It's because we need to select the alignment. Once we've clicked the alignment, you can now see that we have our baseline. I'll now click Include Control Points. That enables the Include Event Points. We can now click into the drawing to accept the named boundaries. We're going to change to our 3D view. And as you can see, the name boundaries are in the 2D and 3D view now. One thing that you'll notice in the 3D view, if I can get this thing to pan. Let's see here. Pan, pan, pan. Tilt, tilt, tilt. There we go. As you can see, the bottom of the bore hole, on some of these it extends past our named boundaries. So now what we need to do is to fix the named boundary. And how we're going to do that is go back to the FDOT tab, go back to the GeoTech Tool button, click the drop down, and we're going to go to the Adjust GeoTech Name Boundaries. We will then select that. We're going to give it about 5 feet of clearance underneath each of the boreholes, which should be pretty good. We'll click OK, it has adjusted it, and as you can see, it has in fact moved the boundary below the borehole. So let's look and see if it has done that to each of the others. Pan and tilt a little more. Get this turned around the way we would normally see it. There we go. Looking better. As you can see, each of these is now well within the bounds. Everything seems to look good. I think we're good to go. For this next part, we are going to use the name boundaries that we just created to then generate our cross sections. So we're going to go ahead and close this one more time. Come up to the Drawing Production tab. We're going to come back to the Name Boundaries, and we're going to click on the lower button on the Named Boundaries to expand that. We are then going to go to our cross-section groups, expand that, go to our cross-section groups, the BL GeoTech-1, select that. If you'll notice, we are not getting our cross-section at the top. That is because we have yet to select the name, as you can see here. So we'll select our cross-section and then select the name. Selecting the name allows us to create the cross-section drawings. We'll click that. Give it a few minutes and it is building, and there we go. We now have a drawing with the cross-sections. As you can see, the terrain in green there is in each of the drawings. One thing that you might notice that's missing from these cross sections is any of the labeling on the boreholes. And what we're going to do is come up to the FDOT tab. Go back to our GeoTech Tools, click there. We'll go to the GeoX section labeler and click that. That will give us a list of all of our cross sections. We can then go to Process and click that. It will go through each of the cross sections and add the labeling. This takes a minute due to opening each of the files. There we go. Looks like it's done. As you can see, we now have our water information in there as well as our strata number. We'll go back to Home, go back to Model, and we can open up each of the individual drawings. As you can see here, we have our station number for each of the boreholes. Again, we have our water data. We have our borehole name and strata information. We can look at each of these individually. Again, water data. Same data again. Same information, different borehole. As you can see, our terrain. And close that. Come back up to model. We can come down to our sheet. Open that. And you'll be able to see all of the cross sections together in one nice sheet. Just verifying that they all look like they're in the correct place. Everything has been labeled, and close out again. And station numbers are in there. So this part looks good to go. One last thing I'd like to show you is if we come back to our work set and we go under the GeoTech file, we can now see the 3 different files that we created. Here is our bridge file, here is our roadway file, and here is our 2D and 3D design file. So everything looks good. We have went through how to use all the different pieces of the GeoTech Tools, which brings us to the end of this webinar. Thank you for joining today's session. If you need any help, contact us through email or the communities@bentley.com. Thank you again for joining today's session. I will be doing Q&A immediately after this. I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you next time.